Hey everybody, it's GauntletX, and welcome back to the Arena Decathlon for Decathlon Event number 9, Omniscience Draft. The Arena Decathlon is a series of 10 events with the goal of acquiring 10 unique Decathlon tokens. We have completed the first 8 events heading into Decathlon number 9, Omniscience Draft. This is going to be the most high variance, RNG dependent, luck based, chaotic Decathlon event out of all 10. The way that this format works is that we will be drafting a 40-card deck out of 3 15-card packs that contain cards from the entirety of Arena, so a very random card pool there. And then when we get into the gameplay, instead of drawing a full 7-card hand like normal, we're going to draw a 3-card hand, but everything that we cast from our hand can be cast without paying its mana cost, and we can get 1 mana of every color to use for activated abilities or casting spells from our graveyard or exile. So this is an incredibly chaotic, incredibly wild draft format. If you've never drafted it before, we'll be going over the basics as I go through the draft, but the simplest, too long didn't read, is to draft every single card draw spell you see, and if there is no card draw spell, then just draft the highest impact card in the pack. That is the simplest way to draft the format. It's incredibly RNG dependent, as I said. The gameplay really doesn't matter too much. This kind of event really just comes down to what bot draft did you end up in? What bot draft pod did you get? Because if you get past a ton of cards that say draw 3 cards on them, you're probably going to win a lot of games. But sometimes you get into a draft pod where you just get 0 draw 3 spells. You get maybe 2 cards that draw 2 and maybe a few that draw 1. And then you're going to get booted up into a matchup where your opponent draws 15 cards turn 1, plays everything, gives their whole board haste, and kills you immediately. So again, very RNG dependent. Not a format for everybody, but we are definitely going into this and trying to get that 9th token, trying to get all 10 of the tokens. So without further ado, let's get into this draft and see where the cards take us today. Here we are in pack 1, pick 1, and there's a lot of great stuff in here, but there's one that stands above the rest for Omniscience Draft, and that is Channeled Force. Again, the way that this format works, we're going to have a 40-card deck with no lands in it. Because of that, we're going to be running 40 out of the 45 cards that we draft, which means a lot of our cards are going to end up being cards that aren't very good in Omniscience. So being able to discard those cards to draw into other cards is quite powerful. Even just a discard 2, draw 2 is pretty good, and that's kind of the worst case scenario for Channeled Force. I guess if we top deck it later in the game, it's going to be pretty bad, but it is tremendously good in our opening hand to filter through some cards and draw into some other stuff. So Channeled Force, I think, is going to be the best card for the format. It's actually kind of close to the counterspells, because counterspells do work very well in the format as well, because there are a lot of really high impact plays you really want to counter. If your opponent has like bad deal that lets them draw 2 and makes you discard 2, if they have that in their opening hand and you don't have a counterspell, you pretty much just lose on the spot. So being able to have some counterspells for instances like that is pretty nice, and Neutralize is a flexible one because you can cycle it away to draw a card if you need. So Neutralize is definitely the second best pick in the pack, but I think I'm going to go with the Channeled Force here. Be a little proactive with my own plays than reactive to whatever my opponent is doing. 2 pretty sweet cards here because there's 2 card draw spells, but I'm probably going with the Shimmer of Possibility. This lets us dig through the top 4 cards of our library, find the best card there, and put it into our hand. So dig for a really big creature, or ideally, hopefully dig into something that draws 2 or 3 cards to get that chain going of trying to cast like 10 spells in one turn. So Shimmer of Possibility, quite good in the format. There's also Gloom Shrieker is the one that it's competing with, because it's technically also card draw, where it picks up our best permanent from grave to recast, but it's really not going to work until later in the game when things have already died, and Omniscience is a super fast format where you really want to just be proactively doing everything you can to try to combo out in the first 2 turns. Some very, very excellent options here. I think I'm going to go with Rock's Oracle, but it's actually pretty close. So this is going to put a 4-2 on our board and let us draw another card to play whatever we draw into after this. The card that it's competing with the most, in my opinion, is Vampire's Kiss, because we get 2 blood tokens off of this card. We don't get to activate them for free, but we do get to use our emblems 1 mana of every color to start filtering away our weaker cards, which, as I said before, we'll have plenty of to draw into better cards. This is kind of a discard 2, draw 2, which is pretty good. Very, very close to a 4-2 that draws 1 card in the format, but I am going to go for the Rocks Oracle over that. There's other fine cards, plenty of cycling cards we could cycle away to draw. The Scholar, that if we have an artifact on board can draw us a card, but it's going to be Rocks Oracle for me. Pick 3. Pick 4, we have a nice simple cantrip here. Just ETB, draw a card, so 0 mana, play this, draw another card immediately. This is probably one of the weakest cantrips. You want your card draw spells to do at least a tiny bit, but I don't know, sometimes we could have something that makes us sack an artifact or something like that. And there's definitely nothing in this pack that's super great. We could take like a 7-6, but I think it's better to just take another card to cycle through our deck quickly. So we have 2 cards really competing here, and they're both somewhat situational card draw. We have Experimental Synthesizer, which lets us exile the top card of our library, and until the end of the turn we can play that card. In this format, we can only cast spells from our hand for free, so with this we would need to hit something that costs 5 mana or less. That being said, everything in our deck right now would be castable off the Synthesizer. The problem with this is when we try to sacrifice it to cast another spell, it would have to be a spell that costs 2 mana or less, because we'd already have spent 3 mana into getting the Samurai. So I actually don't think Synthesizer's that great. It's basically like a worse Energy Refractor most of the time, because we get to play it on the board and cycle it, you know, cantrip it away into our next card. However, it won't be able to cast some of our cards, whereas Energy Refractor, we just naturally draw it, so we could cast anything that we hit off the Refractor. And then with the sacrifice effect on Synthesizer, I feel like it's really likely we don't get to cast whatever we hit. It's competing with a Satyr Enchanter here, which is not any card draw by itself. We have to draft some enchantments to go with it. But if we do get some enchantments, particularly if we can get any enchantments that draw a card themselves, then this could be very good. So I think I'm going to go Satyr Enchanter over Experimental Synthesizer here. Pretty close. Nothing else in the pack is that great. I really like counterspells that can counter non-creature stuff as well, so I'm not super high on Siphon Essence. Because you do end up with a lot of random removal, like by your Silence, that you can pick up for creatures. Counterspells really need to be there for your opponent's very good at instants and sorceries. Alright, pack 1, pick 6 is where we are really running out of gas here. This is where pretty much all of these cards are going to be really bad draws at any time in this format. They're all just pretty low impact. If we get a ton of enchantment, Season Renewal could be okay if we draw it very late in the game. Edgar's Awakening could be okay if we draw it very late in the game. Same with Dead Revels. A bunch of cards that are only good really late in the game. And some creatures that are just way too small to matter very much in the Omniscience format where everything is free. I guess I just go for Dead Revels because it's just a strictly better version of Edgar's Awakening in this format where everything is free. So you just play the Dead Revels for 0 and then you play whatever creatures you picked up for 0 anyway. So you really don't need to put them straight to the battlefield. Something like Edgar's Awakening, putting them into the hand is just as good. And this puts twice as many creatures into your hand as Edgar's Awakening puts on the board, and we're much more likely to have a lot of creatures engraved than enchantments for a card like Season of Renewal, so I'll just go Dead Revels, but I'm not very happy about it. I think I'm going to roll with a boss monster here. There's a couple options that are kind of interesting but not great, like Virus Beetle to make our opponent discard a card. When your opponent starts with a 3-card hand, being able to just play this turn 1 is sometimes okay. The problem with this is you've basically also discarded a card because a 1/1 is almost no impact in Omniscience. So it's really just each player discards a card, is what this card is. Sticky Fingers is also a little bit interesting because we could potentially get that cantrip off of it, draw a card off of it, but that's not going to happen until the creature that's enchanted dies later. But this does work with our Satyr Enchanter. It gives us an enchantment to go with that. And maybe if we get the creature to die, we could draw a card. So that's also kind of interesting. But I think I'm just going to take the big dork boss monster, get our first big creature to try to close the game out with. Big 7/7, that's a copy of whatever artifact or creature we control that we want. So, I mean, if we're really lucky, we control an Energy Refractor or a Rocks Oracle when we play this. And this can draw us a card when we play it. So a 7/7 that draws us a card when it hits the board, definitely better than Sticky Fingers if we're lucky and have one of our card draw creatures or artifacts on board when we play it. There's a bunch of pretty mediocre removal here, like Deadly Riposte and Slimebind that isn't going to work in this format. There is one that would work in the format. Broken Wings does work against flyers. So it's really Broken Wings versus Boulder Branch Golem here. We either take the giant 6/5 or we take the main deckable flyer hate. I think I'm just going with Boulder Branch Golem here, take another big threat of my own. We did wheel the Neutralize, which I'm pretty happy about. Again, nice and flexible, being able to counter that spell or cycle away when you don't need it. Slam Dunk and Neutralize. Everything in pick 10 is pretty bad. The two main cards competing are the Corrupt Court Official and the Join the Maestros. Do we just want to get a 4/3, or do we want a 1/1 that makes our opponent discard a card? Honestly, I'm probably a little more into the 1/1 that makes our opponent discard a card over just a 4/3. Like, rarely are we going to have a creature that's good to casualty into this. Any of our creatures that are going to be like 2 power or more are mostly going to just already be 4/2s and stuff anyway, so I'm just going to take Corrupt Court Official. Take our first Virus Beetle style card, and we wield the Vampire's Kiss, so I'm pretty happy about that. With those blood tokens, this is a discard 2, draw 2 spell to dig through our deck and find our more impactful plays. We did wield a Primordial Worm as well, so we've got just the big 7/6 boss monster. Diligent Excavator can sometimes do some stuff. This did do things back in original Dominaria. You could loop together 2 copies of the Koilos, Guardian of Koilos, because they would pick each other up and you could infinitely cast historic spells. But in the Chaos Draft format, where you have cards from every single set, it's just going to be too inconsistent to mill your opponent out that quickly. We should go for Primordial Worm. Tremendously filler stuff here. Impulse lets us dig 3 cards deep for a creature. It's definitely possible to miss with this, which is really bad. But then Raise to the Ground can just only kill artifacts, which is really narrow. I don't think Return to Action's super worth it. I guess it's good when you do it on a Rocks Oracle, but very bad when you draw it at the wrong time. I'm just going to go Impulse, but I'm, again, very unhappy with the final picks, but you're always going to be in Omniscience Draft. Here we are in Pack 2, Pick 1, and we have 2 cards that synergize really well with our deck. The Elsewhere Flask works well with our Hulking Metamorph, because we can make it a giant copy of the Flask and draw another card, and the Angelic Gift works really well with the Satyr Enchanter, because it draws us a card naturally, and if we have the Enchanter down, we draw an additional card with it. I'm a little more tempted to take Elsewhere Flask here, because I feel like if Satyr Enchanter just doesn't work out, we could just cut it. We only get 5 cuts. Whereas Hulking Metamorph, we already know we're definitely playing it, so just having more and more cards to synergize with it feels really good. That being said, Angelic Gift is more immediate impact, making a thing flying, but with Elsewhere Flask, we don't need a creature on the board to cast it. These 2 cards are competing very hard. I'm going to go for the Elsewhere Flask, though. Hopefully we can wheel the Angelic Gift. The bots in the draft pod are not really drafting to win an Omniscience Draft. They're drafting based on if this were a regular draft overall. Pretty happy to see a Bright Reprisal here. This is an excellent removal spell for the format, because you get to destroy a creature and draw a card, and again, everything is free, so we don't care that it costs 5 mana. Marauding Looter is also good. If we can get consistent attacks going, then we can get consistent card draw, consistent filtering, draw and discard every turn. But Bright Reprisal seems the best at face value here, the easiest to run. A couple different cantrip options here. We have the just very simple 1/1 cantrip of Defiant Strike, immediately cycle it to draw a card, or we have Spark Reaper, which does force us to dip into our emblem mana to use the activated ability, but has pretty high potential upside, where if we draw multiple of our filler creatures, we can sacrifice multiple creatures to draw multiple cards over time. So using the Reaper to sacrifice a Pangolin or something to gain a life draw card, and then waiting to sacrifice the Reaper till later, while still having that benefit like Defiant Strike of if I have no other creatures, or if this is my weakest creature, I can just play it and immediately cycle it to itself, just get my next card. So Spark Reaper seems pretty good to me here. Here we have some more cantrips, so we will definitely pick one up. The Prophetic Prism, another card that works beautifully with the Hulking Metamorph, and just immediately gives us a cycle to draw a card. More cards to cycle away to draw a card that work great with the Metamorph. The Generous Stray is going to be the pickup for me here. Draws us 1 card when it hits the board, and it is a little more flexible than the Guild Globe, because is a nice creature we get to chump block with. And it still synergizes just as well with the Metamorph because the Metamorph copies creatures or artifacts. So excellent pickup there. You Find the Villain's Lair is very good in this format. We get to use it as a counterspell if we need it, while also being a very good draw spell. Draw 2, discard 2 to filter to loot towards our good plays. Seems like a very, very good pickup. Alright, this pack is full of jank. I think we probably take the biggest creature. We could take Rubble Fort and try to get like a turn 1 kill if we're really lucky and have a lot of card draw. But we have not opened enough card draw to consistently hit a ton of cards in one turn. Pretty much all of our card draw only draws us 1 card, which is not a very good spot to be in this format. I don't think this is going to be a 7-win deck. And it's definitely not a position where you're going to be doing what you want to do in the format and playing like 10 creatures in 1 turn. If you have a deck that has a ton of card draw that can really do that, then Rubble Fort could be good because it can get you a turn 1 win by giving your whole board haste, but we just can't do that. We have 0 cards in our deck that draw more than 1 card, and it's not for a lack of trying. We've been taking pretty much all the card draw we can, so I think we just take the biggest, most impressive creature, which is probably Manticore, a 4/5 that comes with a 2/2 every time, versus Air Cult Elemental, a 2/5 flyer that bounces something. Bouncing is not that good in this format because they can immediately recast it easily. So yeah, we'll just take Manticore. Not a ton of options here, mainly just a flying removal spell or a large reach creature that gives us another blocker. I'll just take the reach creature. It probably trades into any flyer we would have gotten rid of from Forced Landing anyway. And we did get nice and lucky here. We actually have 2 cards that work pretty well. The Angelic Gift's basically always going to draw us a card, so it's definitely the pick, and it helps our Satyr Enchanter maybe actually get played in this deck, so that's going to be the pick. But Aviary Mechanic, being able to return any permanent we control to our hand, we're starting to get enough cards that draw us a card when they hit the board that this might actually be just another cantrip. Just pick up an Energy Refractor and recast it with it. But Angelic Gift is another cantrip that requires no work. Alright, this card's going to require a little bit of work, but it's definitely better than everything else in the pack except maybe Natural End. And that's Marauding Looter here, letting us draw a card, discard a card every time we attack with a creature. We now have Defiant Strike for another cycling card here. All of these creatures are pretty fillers, so I think I'm just going to take the Starlit Mantle. It's like not a great counterspell, but it can theoretically counter removal spell. It's mainly another card to maybe trigger the Satyr Enchanter in the deck. We now have a 1/1 that can't block, +2/+0 Indestructible Trick, or a 3/2 that does nothing. Honestly, I think it's just a 3/2 that does nothing. Super awkward pack there. Cleansing Wildfire does literally nothing because there will be no lands on the board to target, so you can't even cycle this away to draw a card because there will be no legal targets. So, Clattering Skeletons is the pick. And we got that Rubble Fort last pick, so if we get really lucky and get a ton of card draw in pack 3, maybe we get there. And we certainly started pretty lucky, because that is a Practical Research. Draw 4, discard 2, unless you discard an instant or sorcery spell. So it could be a draw 4, discard 1, if we just like draw 4 and draw into our Vampire's Kiss or something. This is absolutely huge in the format. Draw 4 is absurd. It is easily the pick. Well, it looks like pack 3 is where we are really getting the payoffs. We now get a tremendously powerful spell to choose from. Luckily, because there's no card draw in here, there are cantrips like Wicked Guardian and Portcullis Vine that we love to wheel, but since there's no draw 2, draw 3, or draw 4 spell, pretty easy to just take an Overwhelming Splendor to put on our opponent, and if they don't have enchantment removal, then they just have a deck full of nothing but 1/1s. They can play all the card draw in the world, but they have to get a lot of 1/1s on the board to kill us, so Overwhelming Splendor, a really nice pickup, pack 3, pick 2. It even triggers our Satyr Enchanter. 2 pretty solid card draw options here. With Arcane Subtraction, we can cast this, then discard a card and draw a card, because if you don't search for a lesson outside of the game, that's just what learn means. So any card with Learn basically just means you can discard a card, draw a card. But then we have the card I'm going to take here, which is Famished Foragers, which, again, with the emblem giving us 1 mana of every color each turn, this is going to let us discard a card and draw a card every single turn. Once during our turn, once during our opponent's turn. Can really dig through our deck and try to find our big, scary plays. And again, a pack with no actual good card draw, like no draw 2s or anything, so that's pretty easily the pick. Here we have a pretty great cantrip creature, so we'll take it, immediately draw a card, keep digging through the deck with Phyrexian Rager. Impale's fine, but we definitely take the cantrip creature over it. Pick 5 is very bad. We have our choice out of a ton of incredibly filler creatures or tiny removal spells. The best card might even just be Enthrall to the Pit, because we can always kick it, so it's just a removal spell for our opponent's biggest creature. And we get to hit them with it one time as well. Atrocity could be okay, because if our Corrupt Court Official or our Phyrexian Rager or something has ended up in our graveyard, being able to kick this, bring them back to the board, draw 1 extra card, or make our opponent discard 1 extra card could be good. I feel like Enthrall to the Pit is going to be more relevant in more positions, though, because it just kills our opponent's biggest creature. Seems fine. It's Atrocity or Enthrall to the Pit. Neither are great. I go for the Pit. Pretty much nothing in here. We just take the biggest creature, the biggest spell, the Cogwork Archivist. Orazca Relic could theoretically draw a card, but we need to have the City's Blessing, so we need to have 10 permanents on the board, which is pretty hard to do when you're not playing any lands. So I don't think that's gonna be nearly a consistent enough cantrip. We'll just take the Archivist there. Pick 7, yet again, no good card draw. We just have the cantrip of Defiant Strike, but I'll go ahead and take it, and we've got one final opportunity to maybe hit at least one more draw 2 spell in pack 3, pick 8. And unfortunately, we did not get there. Our deck is going to have a very, very hard time competing in terms of the amount of card draw. This does feel like a 1-3 or 2-3 deck, but we'll do our best and see where we get here. We just didn't open up or get past any great card draw, and Shadow Prophecy doesn't work at all in this format. Our domain is 0, so we look at the top 0. So that's just not card draw at all, which is pretty insulting, because usually it's a great card draw spell, so that's super brutal. Grab a Seeker of Insight here for a way to draw and discard again, filtering through our stuff. We did get the Wicked Guardian. We've got tons of cantrips, tons of cards that draw us 1 card as we play them. So discard 1, draw 1, but that does put me down a card as well. I lose the subtraction and filter away a different card. That doesn't really seem super worth it, but my other option is a 3-3 that shoots me for 2 damage or a 2-2. So I guess that's the pick. Now we have a whole lot of nothing. Freebooter could be okay in this format. Exile our opponent's draw 2 spell until they kill this thing. So if they don't draw removal for it, we stop them from doing any explosive plays early. Tapping at the window is also fine. You can flash it back, but it's just drawing 2 creatures, potentially, which is fine, not exceptional. I guess we take the 3-3. That's the biggest creature we've got. And the 0-6 over the combat trick. And the 1-2. Alright, well, I think we drafted about as well as we could in the format, but this was not a super winning draft pod. We're going to have to get pretty lucky in the gameplay, probably hitting a lot of early overwhelming splendors or just drawing practical research pretty often to grind out some victories, but we are going to do the best we can here. So let's move aside all of our weakest cards and cut the 5 worst cards in the deck. Not in love with the Starlit Mantle. It does give us another enchantment for the Satyr, which is fine. We're never going to get much value off the Rubble Fort. We're just not going to draw that many creatures to give them all haste, but probably better than Pangolin and stuff. A 3-3 is pretty bad, but a 3-2 is worse. We have so much filler. Yeah, this draft pod was brutal. When you all saw the draft yourselves, we just did not hit those big card draw spells we really wanted. All right. Really definitely showing off the kind of RNG of the format here with a pretty bad luck draft pod. Yep, I think those are the cuts that we make, and we just really cross our fingers with this deck. Hope for the best as we head into the gameplay. This is a decent opening hand when our opponent is on the play. We've got the counterspell at the ready if they have a really explosive, like draw 2, discard 2 kind of spell. Well, they draw 2 and they make us discard 2. It's called Bad Deal, and I've played against way too many copies of it. Scry 2, draw 2. Is that big enough to just counter here? One other card in their hand they could be trying to bait out. I feel like this is big enough to just counter this. If they've got their own counterspell, we probably lose, but it looks like they do not. Alright, well, I guess we freeboot her first and see what it is. See what's going on in there. Leave in the dust. Return a non-land permanent to his owner's hand and draw a card. Okay. So I just get to see what that card is then? It is a 3/4 creature. So I don't exile anything with freebooter, so I'm actually going to keep it in hand then. Draw a card off that. Satyr Enchanter. I think I subtraction discard freebooter to draw a card. I can probably just wait to do that on blocks. I probably should just take less damage here. Again, my deck isn't really explosive enough that whatever I hit off of the subtraction is like gonna find me the win or anything. Yep, and I'll block with Stray, so I don't even want to play Enchanter here yet. I think I am discarding Freebooter, keeping Enchanter. Let's see if this resolves, and then if it does, I'll go ahead and block with Stray. Cool, take 0 damage this turn. Larian Geyser bounced our Stray. I'm incredibly happy with that. I think they should have just bounced their own Pallbearer and recast it, because doing it this way lets me draw another card. Or they could have played Restore and then bounced their own Restorer. Blade Brand their own Restorer to draw a card. And it looks like it's going to be our turn now. Ooh, Channeled Force could be good if we hit a bunch of jank. Primordial Worm is not jank. That's actually a threat. Wicked Guardian also not jank. So here's Primordial Worm. Wicked Guardian shoot the worm. Draw a card. Got a Dead Revels now. Just a freebooter engrave, but once we chump with Stray, that'll be excellent. I'll just keep the Satyr and the Channeled Force in hand past turn and probably start sending him to 7/6. Oh, well, they're going to have some kind of trick here, but if my 7/6 dies, I'll just pick it up alongside my generous Stray. Wicked Guardian also draws me a card when I play it, so I could just make the trade here and Dead Revels. They only have 3 power. Yeah, might as well double block. They kill both, that's fine, with some kind of trick. Hour of Devastation. Okay, they're just going to kill all creatures. Fair enough. And then Thorn Elemental, big 7/7. Sure thing. Let's Flask, draw a card. Defiant Strike. Okay, we'll draw a card off that. So we Revels the Worm and the Wicked Guardian back for the biggest creatures we can play. And the Guardian gives us the card draw, so we're picking that instead of the cat because it's a bigger creature that also gives us the card draw. Refractor into Impulse, see what we get from that. Spark Reaper. Could be nice. card, Brazen Freebooter. That's a pretty filler creature. I could sack the Spark Reaper here. Could also hold it in hand for Channeled Force. Channel Force, draw 2 here. I think I just cycle this to the Spark Reaper. Starlit Mantle's the draw, which means that Enchanter does actually draw us cards, so we hold on to the Mantle to counter any removal our opponent tries to do, and draw us a card with the Satyr Enchanter. Alright. 1-for-1 trade, and then I have all this still left on the board. Top deck was Bite Down, which I can counter with the Mantle. Still trade here. First, draw the card off of the Enchanter. There's Overwhelming Splendor. Sure, draw a card, and now every creature our opponent has is a 1/1 with no effects. Here's Shimmer to dig. Find the Hulking Metamorph. Make a Wicked Guardian. Draw another card. Draw a card off Prism. Got a Bright Reprisal if things go real bad. And attack all. There's a Grumgully from our opponent, but a swing with everybody should find the kill there. They block the 7/7, take 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. We could Channeled Force for the final. No, we couldn't. This can't shoot face. That's kind of weird. This can't shoot face. But yeah, we were definitely winning that with Overwhelming Splendor to make the Grumgully a 1/1 with no text. That's just exceptionally rude. So, alright. Pretty good start there. All the cantrips did just flow together well for us. Again, I think we could definitely get into some bad matchups. Luckily for us, our opponent didn't have a ton of draw 2s or draw 3s themselves. So we just kind of came ahead with a bunch of cantrips. So see if we can keep that momentum up as we head into round 2. Here we are on the plate for game 2. I get to discard a card, draw a card. I normally mulligan really aggressively in this format because you get the free mulligans. The problem is what I usually mulligan into is any draw 2s or draw 3s, and my deck has like 0, so I don't know if I actually mulligan that aggressively. I probably still take the free mulligan. I have my 1 draw 4 spell, so I just hope that I hit that here. Alright, this is better than my first hand. It's not great, but it's better than the first. It's very, very defensive with 2 counter spells. So we'll just drop the Looter and pass. Rock's Pummeler. Yeah, you can have a big creature as long as you're not drawing 1,000 spells. It's another big creature. We might just die to some beef. May just die to some beef. Now it's just some 2/2s. Okay. I'm going to draw for turn, and then I'll probably have to use the Villain's Lair to draw 2, discard 2 here. We need to get enough creatures to kill everything they have down. So we need a 5 power and a 3 power. We can get there. We can get there. Seeker of Insight doesn't seem exceptional here. Let's draw 2, discard 2. Famished Forgers, that's very reasonable. Discard the Seeker and the Impulse. Because my blocks aren't good enough yet. Especially because the Pummeler comes with a shield counter. Again, I feel like it's almost never correct to just counter a big beefy creature, because then your opponent knows they can resolve their draw 3, but obviously it worked out pretty poorly for us here. I think if my opponent had a good draw spell, they would have used it already, so I'm gonna cycle this Neutralize now at this point, because we need to not die to these. Woo! Please tell me they don't have a counter spell left. Oh my god, Overwhelming Splendor. They could trade all 3 of their creatures into my looter. And I don't get any value from drawing discarding anyway, so I'll just pass. Hopefully they don't have any naturalizes in there. Uh-oh. Well, they're reading the Splendor. They can read it all day long, as long as they can't blow it up. And they're going to scoop it up. They just don't have removal for the Splendor. Well, I'm pretty glad I cycled the counterspell there. That was a tremendously good draw. And we are going to luck our way into 2 victories, but that's how you get any victory in this format. Just lucking it out. Here we are for game 3. 1 cycling card and some pretty big beef. I will roll with this here. I am, of course, tempted to mulligan, but I think the beef is really good here. Rager, just keep going. Keep the cantrip chain going as long as we can. Well, that is a cantrip, but it does require my opponent to be attacking me to use it. Cantrips, if you don't know, I've said it a lot today. That's just a spell that draws 1 card when you play it. It kind of replaces itself. Well, there goes my 2/2. What? I have many questions. My first question is, how did they get a Masterpiece Ornithopter? My second question is, why are they running an Ornithopter? Everything's an Ornithopter in this format. Alright, well, it is a top deck war. That's a pretty good start. Opponent's going to draw an additional card every turn now, as long as they control this Dreadhound. That is super bad for me. I'm going to try to bait them into attacking by tapping my Archivist. Oh, I'm so lucky. I'm so lucky. Tapping the Archivist pre-combat made it so it looked like it was a super perfectly fine attack. Got us to kill the creature before the Colossal Majesty goes down. And now they're not drawing an additional card every turn, which is massive. I would probably rather draw discard than play the skeletons right now. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. No, I hit for straight up lethal if I play this. If they don't draw a creature. So I should just play the skeletons. Alright, and they scoop them up. Very happy with that reprisal line there. That worked really well for us, and we're now 3-0 heading into game 4. Here we are on the play for game number 4. I'm going to keep this because it's super interactive. We're going to freeboot their hand to see what's going on in there, and then we have a counterspell if we need to hold it up. 1 draw spell, 2 beefy creatures. Alright. This seems okay to me. Probably do just have to counterspell the 4/6. Then they just have a 3/4 in whatever they top decked. So there's the 3/4. Let's see what they top decked. Flummox Cyclops, the 4/4 reach. That's a fine draw. Alright, Phyrexian Rager, let's go. Cogwork Archivist, that's pretty good here, so I'm not going to discard it away. Forgers, I would rather keep on board for its ability to filter through any of my draws into something better. Right, Vampire Spawn, we've got the board nice and locked up. There's Prism to draw a card here. There's the Hulking Metamorph to copy a Prism. Copy anything else, but draw a card when we play it. My 7/7 Prophetic Prism says hello. Right, just keep going. Alright, Elterguard Ranger now as well. I still don't really want to attack with the Foragers. An attack with Archivist is fine. I'm not going to have anything in my grave for a while anyway. I need to chip down their board a little bit. Need to chip away at their board to actually get in. Uh-oh, that's a draw 3. It is a draw 3, discard 2 at least, but gives them the best card in their top 3, which is not good for us. All right, what's the best card of the top 3? Drownyard Amalgam, just a 3/6. Luckily, it is not another draw spell for them. Start the chain, start the loop. Starlit Mantle. That could be interesting. But I could also see discarding it to draw a card. Yeah, if they go like 3/4 on my 4/3, could be pretty good for us. Kind of the only attacks I have. Oh wait, they just kill the ranger with the amalgam. The amalgam stops like all my attacks. But we do get to mantle away the Griff. I guess that was actually probably worth it, because if I didn't attack with Ranger and Foragers, they could have just blocked Foragers with Amalgam, and then I wouldn't have killed anything. So I had to threaten a third attacker to actually get the Griff out of the way. Ah, but there's another flyer for them. Regardless. And some really chunky blockers. I like to hold on to Neutralize and play it really safe here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 6. They can have 7 power to kill my Prism if they block with everybody, but then I can kill the flyer, kill the Terran. And they don't really have any attacks of their own. I think I'm just going to pass for now, because they can't afford to attack me, or they won't have blocks to kill my Prophetic Prism. We can just stare at each other for a little bit. I can really draw into some decent stuff because I have Foragers if I don't draw anything good to filter away whatever I draw. Dig a little faster. 4/4 Menace. That's fine. Wicked Guardian. Okay, that's more than a good enough draw here. Shoot the Prism, draw a card. Angelic Gift, also more than good enough. That's incredibly good here. Now the Prophetic Prism is in the sky. They can only block it with 3 power. Now we have removal as well. Oh yeah, the Prism's going to kill them pretty fast. I love just beating people down with Prophetic Prism. It's pretty hilarious. Alright, feeling pretty good here. We have the Neutralize for whatever they might draw into. We have the Reprisal if they attack in. Fortuitous Find, pick up a Soul Guide Griff. That's fine. Yeah, they're going to scoop them up. I'm going to let that resolve, because that's still only 6 power against my 7/7 flyer, so... Alright, another pretty lucky, pretty good game for us, and we're 4-0 heading into round 5. Ooh, here we are for game 5 with a Neutralize against our opponent, a Practical Research for our huge draw spell. Feeling spicy this game. This is probably the best opener we've had so far. Chemist's Insight, that has jumpstart so they can recast it from grave by discarding a card. Well, that's better than every card in our deck in this format. That's a horrific start for us. I think we just gotta let it happen since they can just do it again anyway. But wow, is that a horrific start for us? They basically have their own Practical Research. They guaranteed only have to discard 1. Oh my god, now a Thrill to draw 2. This would be a decent counter. They still had to discard that card and now they won't draw the 2. But then they can just jumpstart the Chemist's Insight, which is the exact same thing. I can just counter the jumpstarted Insight if I'm going to do that. We'll just let that happen. But yeah, opponent is already running laps around us in terms of the amount of card draw in their draft pod. Rust Goliath. Well, I really don't want to have to counter that, but I don't think I have enough straight removal. Let's see. See if we get off Practical Research. But I feel like I'm going to have to counter the 10-10 awkwardly. Well, I definitely have to counter their counter if they counter my scoring, because if I just counter this Goliath, I have one card in hand. So, we're probably dead. Because now I just have to counter this to be able to actually have some amount of cards to compete with the amount of card draw our opponent's got going on. There's a Bright Reprisal for that thing. I discard one Shimmer. Yeah, I'll discard one Shimmer instead of Official plus Archivist. Would be the other option. They get to draw another 2 here off of the second casting of Insight. But they are not going to yet. Alright, let's just drop our Flask and draw a card. There's a Metamorph for the Flask. That's pretty fun. Sure. Or do I corrupt Court Official and then Metamorph the Court Official? They can Chemist's Insight. That'll put them up to 3 cards in hand, and I only discard 2 of the 3. That's fine, but not incredible. I think I'd rather just Metamorph my Flask and draw another card. Probably should have went for Court Official first, because they might counter the Court Official since they'd have to discard a card anyway if they had a counterspell. Ooh, there's another counterspell for us? We might actually be doing things this game. Which is surprising, because our opponent did start off with draw 6. Chemist's Insight for draw 2, Thrill for draw 2, and they can redo the Insight for the next draw 2. Drawing 6 total. Court Official gets rid of the Entrancing Melody. That is literally uncastable in this format, so probably good. Unless, yeah, it's literally uncastable, because if you cast it for free, you have to say X equals 0, and if you don't cast it for free, you would need double blue, which you can't get double blue off the emblem. Unless, I don't think it lets you say cast without paying the mana cost and dump this 5 into it, so I think they just can't cast it. Alright, a Muse Drake, that's fine. We will let that resolve. Alright. We gotta make sure this resolves, so if they do anything to counter this, we gotta counter that. I guess I could double block and just lose the Flask, but this is a much better way to kill this because we draw another card and keep all our big creatures. Just try to outbeef them, and it just straight up resolves. Let's go. Let's go. Gearseeker Serpent. Pretty big creature, but they can't give it unblockable. So 7/7 is just bigger, that's fine. 7/6 is also just bigger. And they're just going to pass turn. Let's go. Feeling pretty excellent here. Flask gets to keep attacking in. We still have the counterspell if we need it. If my creatures start dying, I have a Dead Revels that'll be wonderful. Put this Oracle down, see what we get off Impulse. Enchanter versus Freebooter. I'd rather have Enchanter to maybe draw a card eventually than just have a 1 higher power toughness creature. Alright, well, things are looking groovy over here. I would just start attacking with a Flask. Finishing Blow. Their only other card is Chemist's Insight. I have a 7/6 here? Honestly, because I'll still have a 7/6 anyway, I think I would rather just counter the Chemist's Insight later. And I also have Dead Revels to just pick this up now. It's probably good enough, literally just picking that up. Flask is still the funniest thing to copy, so I'll do that again. I could pick Oracle and it would be the exact same thing, but it's just funnier to pick Flask. You gotta go for the humor value of attacking with a big, just a thick Flask. Final reward to exile the Flask? Sure. Again, I still have enough creatures I'm winning on board, so just save the counterspell if something way worse happens. Sack in response, so it's in my grave, so I could recur it. Probably just going to put it back with Archivist, but opponent's just going to scoop it up. And we're going to move on to the next game. I believe we're on game number 6 now. I think we're 5-0. We are 5-0. Really great luck for this Omniscience draft. See how things go heading into round 6. All right, here we are in round 6, with what I think has to be a mulligan. I've got like one cantrip with the Reaper if I sack it immediately, but their cards aren't great early game. Let's take that free mull. This is much worse, but I can't really mulligan to 2, so I'll just hope my opponent plays something and then give their stuff +2/+0, and that's basically the free mulligan right there, is just turning these into other cards. And there's Sift. Opponent has again immediately outclassed us. That is better than everything in our deck in this format. Draw 3, discard 1. Actually, no, Practical Research. We've got Practical Research. Practical Research is better than Sift by a little bit, but Sift is very, very good. Keep forgetting about our Practical Research because we're just not hitting it very often. I could, now that there's a creature on board, start cycling the strikes to try to counter that Griff, but I don't think it would have been super worth it. Alright. Give me some goodies. Foragers is fine. Kitesail Freebooter is also fine. Let's see what's going on in their hand. Frogify and a 2/3. Okay. Their 2/3 can pick up any artifact from their grave. Alright, so this doesn't look horrible. They're obviously winning on board. But we can draw out of this one, because their hand is pretty much nothing. So let's see if we do draw out of this. It's very interesting. Got a counterspell now. I have to get hit by Manticore mostly, but I can block everything else. I'm doing okay. We can top deck out of this situation. I think I keep Starlit Mantle because I can make this a 5/4. Yeah, now we could draw out of this, and we have the counterspell to make sure that they don't draw into a bigger lead. Well, Mantle was pretty good here. And that threatens to attack them for 5 each turn, and they can't even block it well. Could trade into that, but I think I'd rather be attacking with the Foragers. We just need to hit like anything on the ground to block that. Get some chumps going. Could take the 1/1 trade, but then the Griff is just killing me instead. Yeah, I'm just going to take the 4. Got a lot more creatures to clutter up the ground than good flyers I could draw. Marauding Looter, that's very good here. Draw a card, discard a card every turn. And because I have an Overwhelming Splendor in my deck, I think even with the counterspell in hand, I do actually activate Looter here. Alright. And if it's Overwhelming Splendor, we discard the counterspell. If it's anything else, we discard whatever it was that we drew. Threaten a double block on Manticore here, and they can't use a combat trick because I could counter it, but then they have Frogify available, so that feels probably bad. Take 7. It'll be a hard-fought race here. Flycatcher Giraffarid. It's fine. Alright. Impulse, something off the top 3, or do I just filter this away immediately so it's impossible to fail? We're just going to cast it. We could fail. We didn't fail. We hit an Archivist here, and Archivist is great against the Griff. Solid blocker here. think we are getting the attack in playing an Archivist. Also, a 4-5 is really good at blocking their 4-5 as well, so now we're actually just pretty stable on the board. And then we pass. And still digging for the Overwhelming Splendor. That's not that, so we'll discard it. That is why you keep your counterspell. Draw 4, discard 2 would be astronomical here for our opponent. And now we have a Spark Reaper. Opponent can double block the Foragers. Spark Reaper on the board, I can gain a life and draw a card off of it. It's better than discarding it to draw a card. Just gain the life and draw a card. I don't really want to sacrifice it though, but I have nothing else to choose to sacrifice here. So I guess I sack it to itself, see if we get something that lets us get in. Changes things at all? Generous Stray is fine. Clattering Skeletons is fine. I would probably rather discard this to draw a card though. Yeah, I probably would. I'm going to pass turn. I'm going to discard this to just draw a card off the Foragers. Bazaar Barge is pretty big for our opponent. Decent vehicle that immediately draws another card. If it ever dies, that's a perfect target for the Pack Beast. And Imperial Oath is very big here. Scry 3, get 3 2/2s. That is pretty huge. That is pretty huge. Scry 2 to the top. Well, might not be getting out of this one. We are still digging for Overwhelming Splendor. We have a card that will almost definitely just beat them. Alright, so let's Foragers. Draw Primordial Worm, Archivist. They don't have any artifacts. Yeah, they still don't have artifacts engraved, so... It's our strongest card in our graveyard. They're all just cantrips, which they're going to the bottom of the library, so we don't want a cantrip to be on bottom of our library, so I guess it's just Counterspell or something? I don't know. Okay, draw for turn. We hit Elsewhere Flask. We'll cycle that. Invading Manticore of our own. I think that's better than Primordial Worm, actually. So I discard and draw the Primordial Worm here. Arcane Subtraction. I think I'm going to discard and draw that to Foragers rather than discarding Manticore and drawing a card off of Subtraction. Although that does let me get a Forager's attack in here, potentially. Yeah, I threaten a Forager's attack. We'll go for it. Okay. Then we kill the 3/4 flyer first, I think. Shut off one of these, discard the Manticore, draw a card. At this point, now that I know I'm actually chipping in with Foragers. Okay, it doesn't matter which one I target. Oh, there's the Overwhelming Splendor that we've been digging for. That's huge. See if their top deck can get them out of that. Again, if they don't have enchantment removal in their deck... Oh my god, really? I guess they scried it to the top because they could kill Angelic Gift with it? Oh, but it doesn't even work! Oh my god! Literally neither of us knew that at all. It doesn't even work! Oh my god. I was about to be salty. I was like, my opponent is so omniscient, they just knew they were going to need the artifact removal on top. And I was like, oh, I guess that blows up Angelic Gift, so that's why they kept it. Or it blows up Archivist. So it would have been a good card on top either way. But it would have been really good if it could kill the Splendor here. But it's the one with no abilities. It can't kill the Splendor. Oh my god. Overwhelming Splendor has taken so many of these games for us. Has given us so many victories. We've just been really lucky to pick that up in the draft and to have drawn it in a lot of these games. We're now 6-0 heading into game number 7. We are on the play here, cycling a Prism and seeing where it goes. Not incredible, so I'll take that free mulligan. Alright, this is the exact same hand, but very slightly better, because Shimmer lets us dig for whatever we want. Go for Ranger first, see if that gets countered, then go for Shimmer, because Shimmer is our better play. And if Ranger gets countered, that's great, because we've got a Dead Revels anyway. We'd like to have 2 creatures in our graveyard, eventually. Opponent's going to start things off with a Consider, Surveil 1 and draw a card. And Ranger is going to resolve. Now we'll try to Shimmer if possibility. Alright. It's a pretty bold counter, because if I had any draw 2s or draw 3s in my deck, I would absolutely always bait the Shimmer first, because it's just a draw 1. But it does work very well for our opponent here, because our deck does not... We've just got the 1 practical research, and we did not have it in hand. Alright, Disciple's pretty rude right here. Get rid of the Dead Revels, and we are out of stuff. Implementive Examination's a draw 2. Multiple Scry 1, draw 1s. That's a draw 2 right there. Alright, 5-3 Trample. Fair enough. Just a bunch of counter spells in hand, I guess. Well, Metamorph's getting countered here, but I don't have any bait. Ooh, it's not getting countered. Alright, big Energy Refractor, draw a card. Enthrall to the Pit? Is Enthrall to the Pit gonna get countered? No, it must be removal spells in their hand? 2 spells they're just not playing right now. We know it's... If it was draw spells, they would have just immediately done it. If it was creatures, they would have immediately done it. So it must be removal or something? I have no clue. Well, we hit them down to 9 there and sack the Forerunner. So, pretty great spot. Alright, Cycle of Antisar. They pass the turn. We're threatening 9 damage. I'll Corrupt Court Official before anything else. But the fact that they haven't scooped here means they're probably killing our Energy Refractor. Let's just discard spells like Check for Traps, but they've already made us discard enough that we're just playing empty-handed each game. Or each turn. Root Snare, a Fog. Okay, you got it. Got 1 card in hand and 1 turn to get an out. Ooh, Lockbox is very good. Takes a while to trigger though, because you have to just pick a card at random unless you've scryed recently. So it's good when you have a lot of scry in the deck, it gives you that draw 3. But they hit a Swiftgear Drake on top of their library, which is not what they named, which means they don't draw anything. They've got 1 card in hand to survive here. And it does let them survive, tap 2 of our creatures. Alright, we know they're getting a Swiftgear Drake as the draw, which means they have a single blocker. So unless they guess Diviner's Lockbox correctly here, they are dead. Omen of the Sun on top, so they're pretty dead. And they are going to scoop them up. I guess I hit them to 1. They chump block and I hit for 7. But yeah, really lucky run there. Really, really lucky run there. Again, I do want to emphasize this is an incredibly luck-dependent format. There's a lot of RNG, a lot of coin flipping, a lot of gambling involved here in terms of how good the draft pod you end up in is and how good the decks you get paired up against are. And I again think this deck was pretty average, actually, outside of course, the overwhelming splendor being ridiculous. But the amount of cards we have is not that insane. We've got a lot of draw 1 spells, but those draw 2s, those draw 3s, that's really what puts you really far ahead. And I've only got like practical research for that. So yeah, I've definitely played against some much more explosive Omniscience Draft decks than this that just frequently win turn 1, turn 2. But this deck, still good enough to grind out the victories today with a nice 7-0 run. Yeah, really, really lucky with the matchups we played against here. Just a lot of players that, some of them had some really solid decks, they just hit the weaker halves. So that is something you're going to notice a lot in the format. Again, you're playing a 40-card deck, which is 40 out of the 45 cards that you drafted, so you have to run some really filler, really bad cards, so sometimes you just get unlucky, hit the wrong cards at the wrong time. You know, sometimes you draw your root snare, which was like your 40th best playable, that was like, all right, I guess they gotta put a root snare in there. Sometimes you draw into your trusty pack beast with no artifacts in grave. And luckily for us, a lot of our opponents get a lot of the wrong cards at the wrong time. And that's going to be Decathlon token number 9. We have 9 out of 10 Decathlon tokens, so I'm going to do absolutely everything in my power to get that 10th Decathlon token in the On the Edge event. That is what we will be doing tomorrow. I don't know if it's still down. They said that they were taking it down to fix the issue with it. I'm guessing the fact that it's on now means it's up now. So yeah, that's going to be tomorrow's video. We're at 9 out of 10 Decathlon events. We're going to get that final token and yeah, then play some Decathlon finals next week. So great stuff on the horizon if you're interested in that. Other than that, as always, thank you very much for watching this video. If you'd like to see more like it, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to let the YouTube algorithm know to send more in your recommended feed. You can hang out with me in real time at the Twitch channel in the link in the description below. And if you want to support the channel directly, you can check out the Patreon link in the description below. And once again, as always, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you again soon for some more Magic Arena.